Hello and welcome back to Geeky Port, your safe harbor in the world of nerddom. Tonight's episode is going to center on werewolves.
Could it be a full moon tonight, Jamie?
Is it?
I have no idea.
I don't know. We just
It'd be cool.
realized we never had done a show centered on werewolves. We've done ghosts, we've done cryptids, we've done vampires, but no shows about werewolves.
No werewolves, and now we can talk about it. We have that freedom.
Yeah, we have that. We have the lunacy it takes to talk about werewolves. So let's not pause any longer. It's an amazing concept, you know, a person that is perhaps mild-mannered by day becomes a feral creature by the light of the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is their favorite werewolf? In which story?
So werewolves have been explored in many different pieces of media, literature, you know, novels, short stories, comic books, television shows. I really like John Landis's film,
American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, not so much An American Werewolf in Paris.
It's so bad. It's not a good film.
No.
But American Werewolf in London, the transformation in that is pretty, even by today's standards, is pretty tight.
With the special effects by legendary special effects makeup artist Rick Baker.
It is Rick Baker. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
He's the guy that you go to for realistic looking practical effects involving wolves and apes. Well, those seem to be his, because in the 70s, not to veer away from wolves too much, to apes, but he did the special effects for the 1970s remake of King Kong.
Oh, okay.
So it was a man in suit. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I would think it would be like Rick Baker, Tom Savini, Greg Nicotero would be the main guys.
Sure.
But yeah, I think my favorite werewolf. I do like Professor Lupin.
Oh, from Harry Potter, right? Yeah.
He's a good egg.
Who's the actor that played him in the movie?
David Thewlis.
Yes, he was really good, and like constantly nervous because I think was he constantly afraid that he would turn into a werewolf?
I think, or he was just always wary of the full moon.
Yeah, because he loses all control.
Yeah.
But I think if you go back even further, you know, before movies, before television shows, before literature, werewolves existed only in folklore and fable. So I wonder where that actually comes from.
I don't know. Because Wolfman technically, is he a werewolf?
He is.
Okay.
Yeah. The transformation wasn't like man to wolf.
Okay.
But rather a wolf-like appearance, like his arms and legs and face were covered in brown hair, and he had, you know, pronounced
but
teeth.
that happened like on the full moon too, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So there was some kind of transformation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. I think they did. What's that photography where, you know, you have a person or a landscape in one position, you know, shot from one shot, and, you know, over a course of maybe like many minutes to hours, and the footage is then sped up.
Oh, like the time lapse?
Yeah, time lapse photography, right?
Yeah.
That's how they did the. You know, it must have blown people away in the 30s because special effects were new.
Oh, okay.
But for Lon Chaney to be to transform, like they just had him like, you know, staying really still while the makeup department, you know, put, you know, like the basically pasted with spirit gum and mortician's wax and fake fur, like all the appliances to his face and hands, and then, you know, merged all that footage together in post-production and editing to make it look like it was happening in real time.
Very interesting.
You can't so much get away with that nowadays, so hence CGI and you know, more advanced special makeup effects. Like Rick Baker used, I think, bladders, you know, like like plastic bladders.
Oh, okay,
I
I'm like
assume.
sheep's bladders?
Well, yeah,
Maybe
they did that like in the early days of film, but no, like plastic bladders that would inflate through pumps, like on cue. So when the director was rolling the camera, like a snout would like extend. That was all done like pneumatically, like with air. Yeah.
Oh, it's a very cool transformation scene. Did you ever see the show Hemlock Grove?
I didn't.
It's not a great show, but there are werewolves and vampires in it.
Okay.
It's a Netflix original, even though I think Netflix has now taken it off because it is not that good.
Yeah.
However, it has an amazing werewolf transformation in it. And it's similar to American Werewolf in London, kinda. Like he splits and becomes the wolf, and he actually like eats his skin so he can like regenerate and stuff. That's creepy. Really cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, I think at the very least, you have the Wolfman appearance where it's just like a furry face, which honestly, that probably has real life connotations with there's a disorder, and for years, of course, these people were like they didn't live normal lives. They became like carnival sideshow freaks, where they had just like this uncontrollable hair like growing all over their bodies. So that might be one of the origins of werewolves. I think also perhaps, if you don't understand mental illness, and you have someone that's raving mad in the woods, and maybe just you're some unlettered peasant and you just, see this person just like howling in the woods, then yeah, that develops into something beastly, something monstrous.
Well, one movie
into folklore.
I've actually been thinking about rewatching because I think the last time I saw it was 20 years ago. Because speaking of like, it can mean mental illness or adolescence, like in the movie Ginger Snaps.
That's right. Yep.
I only saw that movie once, but it made an impression, and I do want to see it again. Very bloody and very, very menstrual centric.
Yes, right. Because again,
she gets her period and she becomes a werewolf.
Right. It's I don't necessarily think it's tied to the lunar cycle, but
it's tied to the menstrual cycle for Ginger.
So it's something that people are afraid of that happens once a month, and I can see who knows what people were thinking, hundreds of years ago.
It could have. In biblical times, they made women be in like red tents and not shower and stuff. So, werewolves, sure. It was
a less enlightened time.
It really was.
It was less woke.
They were asleep.
Yes.
They were very much asleep.
There are, however, films where the werewolf character, the person that is stricken with the curse or disease of lycanthropy, actually becomes a wolf, either like a gigantic wolf in the case of the Twilight movies, or I'm trying to think of a really good example. Have you seen, in the 70s, there was a film, I'm trying to think of the director's name. I know that he was responsible for The Crying Game and Interview with a Vampire.
He did a werewolf movie?
Yeah, it was called In the Company of Wolves.
Oh.
And it stars Angela Lansbury.
Oh. Angie Lambs? What?
So
we must see this.
It's exploring all these like weird werewolf traditions, from medieval times to the Renaissance. Actually, I think it ends in the modern age, and the werewolves in that are like literal wolves that they trained on to act on camera.
Oh.
But also they shined spotlights at the wolves to make their eyes reflect.
Cool.
Because creatures that have night vision. I don't know what the whole process is. I'm not a biologist, but there is like some kind of reflective coating in their eyes that takes the relatively small amount of light in the environment, and through the reflection ends up amplifying the light the way their eyeballs can send that signal to their brain. So it basically takes the available light. They don't have glowing eyes. They're not magic.
Damn it. Okay.
Wolves are not magic, unfortunately.
Oh, yes, they are.
But their eyes can amplify the amount of light in the environment so they can see, almost as well as they can during the daylight.
Huh.
Yeah.
No idea.
Or as they say in Dungeons and Dragons, dark vision.
Of course.
Interestingly, to go back to like the idea that if you have lycanthropy, you are no longer in charge of your cognitive self. And this, of course, is the dungeon master's prerogative. But if a character is bitten by a werewolf and is, cursed with lycanthropy, there is in the monster manual, it is suggested that during the time of the werewolf curse, like during the full moon, that the player character is no longer in charge of their character. The dungeon master decides what they do. Right?
Interesting.
To mimic the idea that like, I am fearful of this because I know that when this happens, I won't be able to control myself.
Yeah.
The dungeon master takes the sheet and just says like,
Very cool.
So you are famished and you are going to attack your friend, the cleric.
No, I don't want to eat the cleric.
So that horror element of being, aware that you are doing things, but, horrible things, but are completely unable to stop it.
Awful.
Yes.
Interesting, though. Did you ever see another not great film, Little Red Riding Hood?
Yes. Where they took the Twilight, like...
The director of Twilight.
Oh, well, they
Catherine Hardwicke directed it. And there's there's a big bad wolf, but it was a werewolf. Yeah. It was a shapeshifter type person. Yeah. It was so silly, and I love it.
It's entertaining in the way that a lot of the horror films that we love are, in that it's so bad it's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's
they're trying so hard to make like an edgy, like teen goth thing in the midi. Oh,
it was so very well cast.
Max Irons, Jeremy Irons' son, was in it, and Amanda Seyfried, and Billy Boyd, and Julie Crispy. Yeah. Friggin' Julie Crispy was in it.
Refresh my memory. I think that Dracula himself,
Gary Oldman was in it.
Right,
yep.
As a werewolf hunter or something, or some kind of inquisitor.
Yep.
Right.
Gary Oldman was in it.
Yeah.
It had a pretty decent cast.
Yeah.
And the script was awful.
The producers
and yet I watch it.
The producers were confident in the product. Oh, they didn't really have to pay someone that made the concept of Little Red Riding Hood, because there's no estate of the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah. Brothers Grimm is all public.
What do we own? Let's just go to fairy tales because,
But of course, there was the era of Twilight, and it's like, we need to do dark, paranormal, teen romance things everywhere. Let's make Little Red Riding Hood edgy. And they tried, and it was cute. It was something. It was entertaining. It's fun to have a few drinks and watch it. Yeah. Let's put it that way. Indeed. I remember, even though it has nothing to do with the werewolf transformation itself, I just remember there's a scene where they're dancing around the fire. It's like a village dance thing. Yeah. And Amanda Seyfried is trying to make her ex-boyfriend jealous. And she's gyrating. And I'm like, this is the 1300s. They don't dance like that yet. But just to play devil's advocate. Yeah. We both adore A Knight's Tale. I know. Where they do exactly that. But that was on purpose. That was very, very purposeful. Oh, you think they were this is what a folk dance looked like in the 1300s? Kinda. And they just I have to rewatch it. I have to have a few glasses of wine and watch it again. You have to study Little Red Riding Hood. Yeah. Or is it just Red Riding Hood? It might. Because she's not a little girl. She's But it's still I have porcelain skin, and look at my hood. It's a Red Riding Hood. Is she taking some food to grandmother's house? Well, there is the scene of, grandmother, what big eyes you have. What big ears you have. And it's Okay, good work. Yeah, thank you. But with Knight's Tale,
Yes.
that was all intentional because
Okay.
they were all like the rock gods of their time.
Right.
So they played classic rock, and yeah, no one's gonna have like dyed magenta hair with spikes and stuff. It's just like.
So had they been playing during Red Riding Hood, like say Ozzy Osbourne's classic Bark at the Moon,
Yeah.
you'd have been like, oh, I see what they're doing.
Like, okay, this is like a Knight's Tale. It's
I was trying to think
Sorry.
of other. I'll bleep it out.
okay. What's anachronistic?
Yes.
Or is it unanachronistic?
No, anachronistic is not chronological.
Okay, so
So-
yeah, the anachronistic.
Yeah. So
Music.
they used period music, but anachronistic dancing.
Oh yeah, for a Red Riding
Riding
Hood.
Hood,
Yeah.
So, right. So that is jarring. But for A Knight's Tale, they used anachronistic music and dancing. All right.
So it's like, oh, this is all part of it. My dad did not like that, but I like it.
You know, it's funny because I remember the director talking about those choices. You know, like obviously David Bowie wasn't around, you know, in medieval times. But, you know, coolness was,
Yeah.
style was, like impulsive teenagers were. So to mimic that kind of look, because, you know, when you're making a period piece and not a werewolf movie,
Or if you're making Ginger Snaps and it is a period piece
That's
and
right.
a werewolf. Sorry.
there is a potential disconnect that you can make between the work and the audience, right? Because it's like, oh, why am I watching a movie based on something that happened long ago? You have to make that emotional connection with the audience, you know? So if you fill it with, you know, people are wearing period costumes, but if they're dancing in a more modern way to modern music, you can imagine that, you know, those crazy kids are actually dancing to, you know,
A lute.
yeah. Well, some new,
a tight lute is playing. A
some
harpsichord even.
some minstrels, some bards are playing this rockin' tune for, you know, the 13th century.
Yeah.
You know what I
and
mean?
like those teens are like, I've never felt so alive. This song is about me.
Exactly. In a likewise manner, I was listening to an interview from the director of a new production of The Magic Flute, the opera. And the director decided to go with classic video games as the theme. So, you know, all the characters are, you know, characters from Zelda and, you know, Mega Man, Mario. So, because what he wanted to do, and he said, like, you know, the younger people in the audience, I don't know if you know this, but younger people don't typically go to operas, but they were filled with wonder of this, you know, antiquated work, but now seen through this new lens that can grab a new audience and hold their attention. And he said, like, you know, looking out at, you know, the audience of younger people, you know, totally enraptured by all the fantastical elements, you know, in Mozart wrote.
Yes.
Right. So people would have known the fables and folklore and, you know, like the fairy elements, you know, like going into that, right? So they were excited to see that happen on stage, you know, and have these characters enacting and speaking through these voices in operatic ways. But nowadays, we don't really have fairy tales, or the fairy tales of old don't have the same kind of popularity. But if you're a kid and you grew up playing the Legend of Zelda video games and Mario and Mega Man, then that is as enchanting as, say, you know, the European folklore.
I love them. The original Brothers Grimm stories are just so dark in general.
Oh, sure.
Anyway, but with werewolves. Circle back to werewolves.
You were going to write an opera about werewolves.
Yeah, of course. And of course, well, even though they were wolves, how the story of Rome, or it's called Rome because of Romulus and Remus.
Right. the twin brothers who were raised by a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, so what happened to Remus?
I'm not sure. But that's right. Professor Lupin's first name is Remus
Okay.
in Harry Potter.
Yeah. And of course, lupus is Latin for wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you're lupine, right?
Yeah. But
Something
lupus is also like a disease?
Oh, lupus. Yeah. It affects like I think your kidneys or your
Oh,
liver
wow.
or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it affects like your skin. So I wonder if that
Oh.
might have been another origin for lycanthropy.
Maybe. I don't know. I just know it's an internal thing. We're not doctors. I'm so sorry. Who would your favorite werewolf be? Would it be Lon Chaney or would it be
I think so.
American Werewolf in London or something?
Yeah. Well, one interesting thing about the Wolfman movie, as played by Lon Chaney, was that it was actually written by a Jewish man,
Heck yeah. It
Kurt
was.
Sidemak, who wanted to write a story about someone that felt like they didn't belong in a larger society. So even though it's still told through the lens of like Christian European folklore, like he was still telling that kind of story that he was familiar with.
I did not realize that. Makes me love it.
Yep.
I'm Jewish, by the way, so I root for it. That's neat.
So that's obviously a classic. Universal monster movies in general, from like the 30s and 40s. I think those are among my favorites. Like the birthplace of Gothic horror and film. Yeah. So it's really cool to kind of return to that now and then.
I'm trying to think if there are any animated werewolves. There have to be, right?
Animated werewolves. I can't think of anything Disney or like American related. I know that werewolves get explored a lot in like Japanese video games and anime.
Well, in Beastars.
Oh, well, yeah. Right.
Lego, but he's a wolf. He's like an anxious wolf. He's not a werewolf.
But in a sense, when he sees his prey, the spoilers for Beastars.
It's so good. Watch it. Legoshi.
Legoshi is enamored with a fellow student, a rabbit. So is both in love with her and also wants to devour her because he is a carnivore and she is as nature dictates his prey. So
but he's also like super anxious and awkward.
So in a sense it becomes like a wolf that has lycanthropy. Like he becomes like kind of unable to control himself.
Mm-hmm. It's really good. Wait, that's not Netflix? Is that still on Netflix?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I still haven't seen season 2.
Me either.
Yeah, got to dive back into that.
Yeah. Season 1.
That's good stuff.
You didn't think you need to see something like that, but you do.
Yeah.
Of like teenage animals like hooking up. Go figure.
It's the adult Zootopia. Right?
Well, our friend Sarah summed it up as it's what Disney should have done with it's what Zootopia should have been if Disney weren't cowards.
But clearly Disney wasn't making something for adults.
I know.
Zootopia does explore some
and stuff.
Right, yeah. But no, they're not going to go to the lengths that Beastars are.
It's saucy.
They would get lawsuits. That would be a lot of angry parents.
Yeah.
So there's a video game by the Japanese company Capcom called Darkstalkers, where all the characters are classic monsters, but also from like multiple traditions. Like you have these European monsters, like John Talbane, who is a werewolf. Mm-hmm. In fact, he, like you've seen fighting games where like, the characters like come up like onto the stage that they're on and they do like a little taunt. Mm-hmm. So John Talbane comes in as like this scrawny guy and he like looks up, he looks skyward and goes, like spreads his arm out and his shirt bursts open. He starts howling and he turns into this kind of man-wolf creature to be a viable combat in the resultant fight. So yeah,
Gorgeous.
but yeah, there's a vampire, there's a mummy. There are creatures from Japanese and Chinese folklore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a really fun game if you get a chance to see that. Classic 2D fighting action.
Nice.
Let's see.
But werewolves, they have represented mental illness,
Mhm.
puberty,
Mhm.
otherness, and I guess general otherness.
Yes, right.
Which, I think we can all relate to a little bit.
The director of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein was, and this was unheard of, during the 30s, but he was a very out gay man.
Oh, yeah, that's the Gods and Monsters guy.
Right.
I cannot remember his name right now. Ian McKellen played him in Gods and Monsters.
So again, writing from the perspective of, I'm trying to belong to the society and I am not accepted by it.
Mm.
So the director inserted himself, story-wise, theme-wise, into Frankenstein's monster.
Mm. I dig it.
The monster is Frankenstein.
It's true.
Yeah. What is intelligence is knowing that Frankenstein is not the monster. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster. The true villain of the Frankenstein novel and movies is the doctor himself. Right?
That's
My
true.
God, what have we done? No, but it's you have to write something that connects with an audience. So it has to deal with actual feelings. Otherwise, it's trite. It's melodrama. It's Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
Because you watch that and you're like, I cannot take this seriously. It doesn't even if it's fantastical, it doesn't affect me on an emotional level.
Well, I mean, even though it's not werewolf, but Shape of Water, how Guillermo del Toro is like, that's how I feel. Or he's like, I always sympathized with the Gill Man and with the asset in Shape of Water, because it's like, I'm an immigrant and I always felt out of place. And so I always related to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be through some kind of relatable lens like that. Otherwise, it's just special effects.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in our last few moments, let's think about any kind of media that involves werewolves that we haven't covered.
It would be interesting to see a werewolf transformation in theater.
Ooh.
You don't get to see that very often.
There's not a lot of horror in theater. And when it does happen, it's like a musical.
Yeah, yeah. Let's write one.
There was no werewolves in the adaptation that we saw, starring our dear friend Devin of Dracula.
Oh yeah. There wasn't.
Man, I think I need to write that.
I know.
All right.
I guess there's going to be a production soon in the future of a stage adaptation of either The Wolfman or just a werewolf story or something.
Yeah. It'll be unique.
Figure it out.
And it's going to make my career.
This is going to put me on the map.
All right. So I'd like to thank you, the viewers at home, for watching this episode of Geeky Port about werewolves. Catch us again next month for another exciting episode with a brand new topic. So we'll catch you on the flip side.